hearty welcome to one and all. This is episode 135 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for joining me here on this windy but nice Friday here in New York. If you're checking out this episode on the YouTube channel or enjoying the content, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, and turn on those notifications. Or if you catch up with this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. So we're going to shift gears temporarily away from movies, although I'm sure I'll bring up a couple of movies here and there. But I want to talk about a concept that I spent a lot of time pondering as a child and as a teenager, as a much younger person, and that is adulting and what it means to be an adult. You could look at a dictionary definition, and certainly as a small child, if someone had said, Jared, when you're 30, are you an adult? Yeah, shorthand. Yes, when you're 30, you're an adult. But as a child who very clearly was neurodivergent and on the autism spectrum, even if they didn't exactly say it that way in 1980 or 81, when I was very impressionable, very frightened, impossible to make eye contact little kid. But even with that, I understood there was more to being an adult than simply chronological age. Just as there was more, marriage seemed more than just two people who happened to live in the same space. There appeared to be something other. And like I believe that my parents, there was something different. I ended up being wrong about that. I saw something other than what the reality is with two people who were married. So you're a little kid, you're not thinking in terms of divorce, or at least I wasn't thinking in terms of divorce. I thought that people such as my parents who were together were just always going to be together, that it was understood. As you get older, you realize that's pie in the sky ridiculousness. It's so much more involved and complicated than that. And yeah, it seems pretty obvious now. But when you're a little kid, even if you're intelligent, even if you are a deep thinker for such a small person, you still need to live and you still need to see. When I think of adulting now, my view on it is a lot different than it was, even as I approached theoretical adulthood of my late teens. And I absorbed a lot of disappointment, a lot of fear, a lot of failure. And I showed a little bit more toughness looking back on it than I believed at the time. So there were times where we end up getting thrown into deep water without even realizing that we have been. And hey, son of a bitch, you know what? I came out of that okay. The way I perceive adulthood, being an adult now, is different. To me, it is when you start having to make decisions and take actions that you previously didn't really have to, because there was always someone else you could defer to give you a hand, to help out. And what I understand personally now is that my dear old dad, Alan Philip Cohen, may he rest in peace, my father and I we were close but not close in the sense that we spent so much time together. But he was a little bit of a tough nut to crack. He was a difficult guy to really get to know because he was quiet and he was private. And there were a lot of things I did throughout my life that really pissed him off. Because in some ways, we were so much alike, and that's where you get the kind of butting of the heads. But what I understand is that however my father processed adulthood himself and processed the role of parents in their child's life, my father from first to last, not from a physical sense, but from an intellectual and psychological sense, my father clearly saw himself as a protector to me. And part of it was the sense that as much as you had asked him a couple of decades ago, Do you think your son is intelligent? He said, yeah, he's really smart. Okay, well, why do you keep throwing a net for him? This is because we tried it when he was a kid. We tried to do the old sink or swim tough love thing. Kid almost drowned. Can't do that anymore. So my father, for almost his entire decade of 30s, his 40s, his 50s, his 60s, into his 70s, without me being aware that this is what he was doing, he was protecting me. Not from the horrors of the outside world. I don't mean it in that way. But he clearly saw himself as keeping me out of harm's way, keeping me from having to make any real heavy decisions, from having to make life-altering choices. And because things had gone so badly when I was a younger person, and he and my mother had a lot of problems and split up, but ultimately remained very important to one another once they got past the initial I hate you, fuck you phase. And the fact that they had this rapprochement, it was very important to the psyche of myself and of my sister, if I may say. But Dad, whether this part was intentional or not, he kept me from having to be backed up against a lot of different walls that the average person would have faced, maybe even in their late teens, with having the same kind of family structure, whether or not two divorced parents. But I'll give you an example. My mother, my dear mother, my crazy, amazing mom, living in Florida now, playing the slots every day. Come on, 7! She had a crisis when she was very young. Maybe she was 19, 20, and she moved to Puerto Rico. That's what you call living without a net. You want to say, especially in the pre-social media age where you couldn't really be in contact with people to any great extent except on a normal phone, like a regular phone call, international call. Don't reverse the charges. It's expensive. I never had anything like that. I always had the backing of, in some cases, my mom, but in the other cases, my father. I didn't have to take out any student loans. Dad saw to that. He lived his life a certain way. No, Jared, don't worry about that. Your mother and I have this. You're fine. And that continued even at an age where my contemporaries, you know how many brilliant people that I shared space with at New York University, people who went on to have careers that you might not know their name, but you sure as fuck know the movies that they worked on. In some cases, were part of the writing team. In other cases, casting or just on the production. These people were dealing with stuff that, now I wasn't dismissive of it. You know, oh, hey, Randy, you seem down. Everything okay? Yeah, my fucking loans. My loans might not come through. You may not see me next semester. Oh, shit. Oh, man, I'm sorry. I never had to worry about anything like that. So, yeah, I was already an adult when I was 21, and I got good grades at New York University. I took it seriously. I was not, as much as I had the attitude, oh, fuck this, fuck that, fuck everything. This is all fucking bullshit. You're classic early 20s Generation Xer. Like, I was almost like the prototype, and not just me. There were other guys my age bracket, there's similar situations who had the same fuck you attitude almost all the time. But I took the studies seriously. I did not say fuck you to doing the work. That is a fair statement. But I wasn't dealing with adult stuff. If you had asked me at 21, are you an adult? I would have said, yeah, of course I am. You fucking stupid. I'm 21. But I realize now I was not an adult because I didn't have to face real life situations, financial hardships with real consequences which could impact my existence forever. I didn't have to deal with any of that. Nothing. And so I made it through New York University, graduated in May of 1997. I can't believe it's going to be 27 years in May. And the commencement speaker, William H. Cosby Jr., Bill Cosby, who gave a great speech, truth be told. I'll spare you my Cosby impersonation. But Cosby gave a great speech. And he essentially was advocating and advocated during the speech for what I'm talking about here. He was telling us, you worked hard here. Don't let anyone take that away from you. They don't give the diplomas out at New York University. And if you have to rely on your parents for a few more years, you have my permission. Place went fucking crazy. Man, Washington Square Park, that was the last year that they held graduation at Washington Square Park. There just wasn't enough room. I mean, if you have a big family, everybody wants to see you graduate. We had, 2 tickets? The fuck was that? Yeah, my mom and my dad. My sister and my aunt had to go, I don't even know where they were, but they were not in the park. There wasn't enough room. But the idea is, skated through my 20s. Yeah, I was working as a screenwriter. I had a lot of ups and downs in my 30s and into my 40s. But at no time did I have my back against the wall where I was under enormous financial pressure or life pressure where I would start to have to make decisions that were going to hurt me, but the other decisions were worse. I didn't experience any of that. I didn't feel real pressure that most people feel by the time they get out of their early 20s, and in some cases, by the time they're in their middle teens. The stresses that I felt were different. The stresses I felt were personality conflicts, having difficulties at home, my mom and I being at loggerheads for a number of years, my mom's boyfriend at the time throwing me out of the house. That's real. That's traumatic. That's terrible, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody. But at the same time, I had options. Not everybody is fortunate enough where if they have what I just explained to you, bro, your father lives 6 miles away. His door is open. Not everybody has even that. That the first part of what I just said could have been, okay, now you're an adult kid. You got a knapsack. You got $50 in your pocket. You got nowhere to go, nowhere to live. What are you going to do? No, I didn't experience anything like that. Nothing. Charmed life. As much as I was bitching and moaning, I didn't get it. Yeah, this sucked. Nobody should have had to go through that. But I still had fallback. I still had the safety net that my dear old dad, whether he meant to or not, had crafted and would continue to craft for me. Now, I'll spare you the intricacies of the kind of ups and downs I had with my father. Because the thing is, my dad was a really funny guy, despite the fact that he was neurodivergent and a workaholic, and somebody who, with 2 other gentlemen, one of whom has passed, Mike first, the other one, Harold Shulman, is still going. They put together a really nice mid-size accounting firm. And man, they busted their tails. These guys were all ballers when it came to knowing how to do the work and knowing how to get their clients to pay on time. My dad was a master. He was a wizard, and you wouldn't have expected it from him. That's something you can't go to school for. The fine art of separating people from their money. But how do you get clients to pay if the clients themselves are having trouble? Maybe their company is not doing so great. Dad figured it out. He just had a way. He knew how. He didn't appear to be a people person, but he had his moments. But as much as my father and I, we had our contentious times. We had our, I don't want to say screaming matches. It was, sometimes he would just get so frustrated. But we bonded over things like movies and the Yankees and stand-up comics that we both enjoyed and stuff like that. But I did not start to face real-world decisions, real-world consequences. And I was married and my marriage ended. So I had real adult stuff that took place, but still wasn't backed up against the wall, was never in a situation of, OMG, I am fucked permanently if this goes wrong. My dad's entire, at least the last 25 years of his life, appeared to be preparing me, and to a lesser extent, my sister. My sister often lived out of state and away, as she still does. So it's different when you spend so much time with somebody. I mean, the last, 5+ years of my father's life, I was living a mile away. He had the house in Huntington, and I had an apartment in Huntington Village near the Book Review and the Paramount Theater, for those of you on Long Island who know Huntington and didn't know exactly where I was. But Dad was living his life a certain way so that if things took a turn for the worse, his hope was that he would have imbued me with enough, I'm looking for a Yiddish word, I don't have it, but looking for enough substance that when I was suddenly thrown to the wolves, metaphorically speaking, I would be able to figure my way through. In some ways he was right, in other ways, unfortunately, I possibly let him down a little bit, but we can get to that in a little while. When my father's health took an unfortunate final turn for the worse, which was not quite 3 years ago, it was suddenly on me to start making important decisions because he could not any longer make these decisions, which he had been making since he was in his late teens and took control of his own personal situation, his financial health, so to speak, when he got out of college and went out to the workaday world and began earning a damn good living, even as a much younger person, as a kid, was making good money. And then in the military and getting out of the military, starting to save and put together a life. So there's certain things, and there's a lot of jokes on the internet. We've all seen the memes that they taught me about the Pythagorean theorem, but I don't know how to balance a checkbook. Or I can't wait for Pythagorean theorem season. They didn't teach me what to do during tax season, but I'm just waiting for that magical time. We haven't experienced it yet, but someday it will be here, Pythagorean theorem season. Now, spoiler alert to all you youngins, there is no Pythagorean theorem season, but there is a tax season. My dad was a CPA. Always did my taxes. Always did my mom's taxes, my sister's taxes, his own. And when he retired, they had to make sure that he had merged with this humongous firm in the city, and they had to make sure because they had issues where some people who were retired were actually working on the side and nickel and dime an extra 5,000 here and 10,000 here. So he was told, don't do that. Please, we can't force you not to, but we're asking you, don't do that. If you want to work for free, fine, but please don't charge people. Only do a couple of returns. Okay. Well, he did stick to that. But heading into tax year 2021, my father could no longer do his tax returns. And me, who took a few accounting classes in college and only passed because he basically gave me every ounce of wisdom for accounting 101 and accounting 102, it's how I managed to pass. He was a good teacher, even though he never taught. He would have been a good teacher. So I never thought of him as a person with enormous patience. But you see, to be an accountant, you have to have incredible amounts of patience. You have to be willing to look at the same bullshit for 10 straight hours, accepting personal needs breaks. You got to have a lot of patience. And my dad had infinite patience with me, even if I frustrated him. So I did his tax return. And I did his tax return for tax year 2022, the year in which he passed. I guess I'm saying that I didn't fully become an adult until I was scraping my late 40s, which from a certain point of view is embarrassing. But from the other perspective, better late than never. And there was so much in life that I didn't think I was ever going to experience that suddenly I did. And I've gotten to. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. And I'm grateful for the safety net that my father very carefully constructed, whether he was trying to carefully construct it or whether this was the only way he knew how to live. Because what I always got from him were his parents did not have that much money while he was growing up. But when my grandfather, Nathan Cohen, one of the old-timers, when he started earning a great living, when he was able to get into the bowling alley and nightclub business in the early 1960s, his whole process became his kids, my father and my aunt, who is still very much with us, doing great, living in Manhattan, and the grandkids. His goals shifted from himself to those behind him. And my father, at a certain point in his life, stopped living for himself. And this is not a criticism of anybody who does this one way or the other. because there is absolutely nothing wrong with, once your kids reach a certain age, treat them like an adult. And if they keep fucking up, not that you don't love them, but hey, it's time for you to sink or swim. But presumably my father saw me as delicate, and the fact that I did not exactly react well to the sink or swim tough love attempt when I was younger, I think he was afraid. I don't want to lose him. I'll just keep trying to push him in the right direction. So ultimately, I ended up having to do a lot of stuff that I wasn't exactly trained for. On-the-job training, almost literally, where I had to take all of these disparate elements of financial statements, documents. Okay, this is exempt from taxes, this is not. This is how this gets divvied up. This is how that. We pay this bill from this account. All of these things that I kind of learned as I went along. And it was my father's wish. What you're looking at here, not literally, but my father, his plan was to live in this house with me. He thought he had at least another decade, and it turned out he only had a couple of months. So when his health took the final turn, and I put pen to paper on this home here in Coram in March of 2022, and I got to experience things that most people don't get to. And this is where the kind of grateful sense and feel that I did not have as a younger person, that I sort of got religion, metaphorically speaking, as an older person. Most people don't get to buy a home and watch it get built from the ground up. I did. I have. And my father, unfortunately, not long after I signed the papers on this home here, which is now 2 years ago, took a lot longer to build this place than projected. Signed the papers in March of 2022, and the original theoretical closing date, January 15th, 2023. I didn't move in here until November 1st of 2023. So it was a very long, in the gestating phase process. But as I say, my father's health took a final turn, and he never got out of the hospital and or rehab place within 3 weeks of putting the pen to paper here. But he always believed that I had it in me to show a little bit more gumption, a little more moxie than I had. Because it isn't always about intelligence. It's sometimes about calculating risk, calculating percentages, and figuring out a way forward, even when others tell you there is no way forward. So to get into a little bit more detail, just in case anyone is interested in how a random, a normal guy like myself ends up in this house by myself with my 3 cats. The plan all along was to sell one house, not flip. Now, I'm not talking about house flip, but the idea was to sell my father's house, and that's how we were going to finance this place. It's not that wacky. Now, often it happens with older couples who have a home and then they're going to kind of downsize and move elsewhere. I have a number of friends. Well, I have one friend who was retired and did that. It was a different kind of downsizing. He moved to an incredible place. It just was in an area where it was less expensive, relatively speaking. Living in Woodbury or even Huntington or certain areas of Dix Hills versus living in Coram. The price point here, the exact same kind of stuff in Woodbury near like Crest Hollow and that kind of area, it's going to be like 7 figures. You might have 1,100 square feet. Well, what's the price point? 900,000. So we're talking levels. My dad was somebody who was very thorough and asked a shit ton of questions. He wanted to be 100% certain that things could not go wrong. I wanted to be that way, but unfortunately, I didn't ask nearly enough questions when this whole process started to play out. Now, bear in mind, I was living in an apartment in Huntington Village. I got out of that apartment sometime in March, April of 2023, and I cleaned it out and everything like that. Gradually cut off all of the bills. Here's some adulting for you. stopping all of the different bills that you're going to continue getting charged for if you don't call the appropriate people and or send the appropriate emails and or cancel the appropriate accounts. Not something that I'd ever had to do before. Okay, we took care of that. Adulting, number one, nicely done. You're completely out of the apartment by sometime in April of 2023. Move into my father's house. My sister and I start to clear the place out, get rid of as much crap as we could, and all of the stuff that's going into storage, we're going to put it all in the garage. Because my dad was very meticulous. He had bookshelves in the garage, but other than that, the garage was empty. He had never used it for any kind of storage because he liked to park his fucking car in the garage. He put his car in the garage. What an incredible concept in 2021, 2022. He was still driving his car, putting it in a fucking garage. I don't know that there was another person in that development that used the garage for that reason. They already had the thing packed with shit, as he would say. Everybody's got their garages just filled with shit, Jer. That's how he talked. He'd get very like that. So my sister and I got the house in order and began the process of preparing it to sell. And ultimately, what happened was, without going into the specifics of the finances, because let's face it, and anybody who's experienced buying a home, or even if you're a young person and you've talked to your parents about the process, the numbers are just stupid. Like, we're regular people and we're just throwing numbers around like, oh, 20,000 for this and 30,000 for that. And then you got to schmear this guy $3,000. Yeah, I threw a little Yiddish in there, schmear. Yeah, you got to schmear him. You got to give him 3,000. What do you mean schmear him? Just give him a little. Give him a little. That's great. So we started the process of trying to sell my father's house. And things went wrong. A lot of things went wrong. We had a buyer who committed verbal agreement and reneged at the worst possible time. And long story short, because this could be an hour, and I don't want to keep you here that much longer than the usual time, there was a chance that I was going to default on this property here, because the idea, again, it's perfect. The logic is perfect. You sell one house, and let's say hypothetically it's worth more than where you're moving. Well, you're good to go. Theory doesn't always translate into reality. You ever hear of a thing called trickle-down economics? We can talk economic theory. Trickle-down economics is supposed to work. It sounds great. The logic is there, but in the real world, it doesn't always work that way. So what I just said to you, well, you just basically, and that's with the house flipping and swapping, same concept. I didn't ask enough questions as far as what's my level of risk here if I don't have X number of dollars by X date. I didn't ask these questions. Now, we didn't start trying to sell the house in Huntington until the third week in May. We should have started to try to sell the house in Huntington no later than the beginning of April. And even that might have been a little bit nervous. So those were mistakes that my father would not have made. He would not have made. He would have been prepared and he would have started the ball rolling much sooner if he had still been with us. But he wasn't, and that's the point. So this was me in a situation that most people are only going to do this once or twice in their life. But I didn't ask the right questions at the right time. And so there were moments and days and weeks of unrelenting despair and gloom where I kept feeling as if for everything that my dad had done for me to prepare me for this kind of situation. You never want to think about your parents' mortality. Who wants to think about people they love, who have cared for them, who have loved them, whether or not there were ups and downs? You don't want to think about a time when they're not going to be here. But he used to talk about it. He said, Joe, we got to talk about this. I got to tell you what to do. I have to tell you where Dad, I don't want to know. I have to tell you where everything is. I need to tell you where the appropriate keys are for a safety deposit box and the information that you're going to need to do the estate and divvy it up the way that I would like it to be done. You need to know where the will is. You have to know all these things. And again, this is years earlier. This is when he was still in his 60s. But again, the CPA accounting brain, trying to prepare, always prepared, always asking questions. So his son didn't ask the appropriate questions and nearly got caught very short. And a lot of money had already gone into this place. They don't start building properties out of nowhere because you sign papers. You got to come up with the do-re-mi. It's all about the do-re-mi. So a lot of money had already been invested here. And they were building a beautiful house. They were doing a great job. And then when the proposed closing happened and the timing wasn't going to work out, there was a horrible day where my attorney called me and said, Jared, I'm sorry. I think this is the end of the road. We may need to negotiate a buyout, and I hope you can get some of your original investment back. Now, I'm not flexing here, but the original investment was a lot of money. And just the idea of somebody taking even a cent of that, no, that's not going to work. So normally I am deferential, and I'm the sort of personality who is always looking to, hey, no, it's okay. We can come to an agreement. But I believe the spirit of my dad and his dad, man, Grandpa Nat was tough as nails. Yes, he had a heart of gold, but he had steel in his spine. So in this moment where I was being urged, back away, let's see if we can negotiate a buyout. No, that's not going to work. We're not negotiating any buyout. The only outcome that's acceptable here is moving into that house. Period. And if somebody says they want a court fight, fuck them. Bring it on. I'm not fucking going anywhere except into that house. You know how many times I felt like I let my father down? And how many times he shrugged, all right, Jared, get it next time. You'll do better. It's okay. Not this time. To the last. To the fucking last. Like Khan in Star Trek 2, from hell's heart, I stab at thee. I'm not going anywhere except here. So needless to say, the attorney pitched a proposal. The builder said, yeah, of course. No problem. Let's do it. So, made an additional deal, and lo and behold, sale of Dad's house came through, and before you knew it, everything was, in the words of my grandfather, Nathan Cohen, ipsy pipsy. But that one moment, that one phone call, I'm not necessarily the most metaphysical person. I like to believe that I'm spiritual. But in that moment where I was being advised, cut bait, cut and run, it's okay. You did your best. Just wasn't in the cards. No, no thank you. In the words of Rocky Balboa, keep moving forward. In that moment, my father and his father, I believe, had my ear somehow, some way, and they were pushing me. Don't accept this. We gave you the tools to not retreat. Fuck them. Push forward. And that's exactly what we did. Push forward. It appeared to be a brick wall in front of me that I was going to have to turn around from. No. Went right through it. Didn't even go around, just went right through it. Just listen, threaten them. Tell them I'm not going anywhere. You want a court fight? Go ahead, let's do it. I can outlast them. Do we really want to do it this way? Give them the middle finger. Tell them I'm not going anywhere. What are they going to say? Adulting doesn't have to be combative. I thought it was going to get combative there, and I was certainly in a combative mood on the phone. But it doesn't have to be. But in this instance, adulting was facing real-world decisions, making real-world mistakes, terrible mistakes, mistakes of omission, not commission, mistakes that I should have been able to sidestep and avoid, steps that should have been taken that I just didn't. But that's life. And some people learn these lessons in their teens, 20s, maybe 30s, maybe even early 40s. I learned them late. Hell, I was already 49 when this happened, when I was facing these real world, serious repercussions as a result of mistakes and decisions that could have easily turned bad. Adulting. There's no magic to it. And you may not even realize that you've become an adult. And as crazy as it is, I was almost 50 when I could say, yeah, I'm an adult. I'm doing adult things. I'm living in an adult house with 3 adult cats. And I'm still, as ever, just about the luckiest person any of you will ever meet or know of, even through inference. Thanks to the efforts of my parents, and especially my dear old dad, who spent his whole life protecting me. And fortunately, when it came time for me to escape that, I don't want to say womb, but when it came time for me to sink or swim entirely on my own, I had these moments of crisis. And somehow, his spirit pulled me through. Adulting, finally, at age 49. This has been episode 135 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'm sorry I get a little emotional, but if you've caught this episode on the YouTube channel, have enjoyed the content, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, and turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, comment, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with episode 136, probably a much lighter, fun episode, real soon. But until then, enjoy the rest of your Friday late afternoon into early evening. Peace.